My name is Nick Bates. I am the director of the Howard Thurman Center for Common Ground here at Boston University. I'm excited to welcome you all here to celebrate the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. I must mention that I'm proud to follow in the footsteps of Catherine Kennedy, who was the first ever paid director of the Howard Thurman Center for Common Ground, and Ken Elmore, who helped pioneer the way for this center that we have here on campus and is special. And for years that they got the opportunity to host this event, and I get to follow in their footsteps and be the MC for you all this evening. So I'm thankful for you all for coming in today, and I'm sure you all excited to hear from Dr. Evel Ewing. Good job. Okay, so each and every year, we start with an idea for a theme. We wanted to talk about education this year, and we wanted to talk about some really important things from a speech that we found by Dr. King that occurred August 31st, 1967 in Chicago. Now, I must mention, my goal is always to find speeches and sermons from King that you don't normally hear about or you're not familiar with, because I want to introduce our audience to something new. And I found this wonderful Chicago through line where I found a speech delivered in Chicago. Dr. Ewing, our keynote speaker, is a professor at the University of Chicago, and she's from Chicago. And I must mention that we love Mayor Wu here for us as the mayor of the city of Boston, but she is also from Chicago as well. And then lastly, I'm from Chicago too, so clearly I'm biased. I'm just gonna be honest here, right? But I found this through line of this speech called The Three Evils of Society, and Dr. Ewing has a book called Original Sins. And I said, man, we get to talk about some really cool things. Her book traces the history of American education and its impact on Black and Indigenous people in the United States. And she talks about the original sin, about how education is constructed. And then we get to talk about these three evils of society, as King called them, when he talks about racism, extreme materialism, and militarism. And I said, this is going to work pretty well for us. So what I did, I said, hey, I texted a good mentor and friend of mine, Jerry Hawkins, and I said, man, you think Eve will come here? Like, I'm really excited. You think she'll really do this? And he says, team, let me see what I can do, and I'll hit her up and see how it works out for us. So I'm grateful for Eve coming in today for us and doing this speech for us. And then I really want to talk a lot about King's impact in this world. I want to talk about civil rights today, but I also want to talk about archives. I think it's really important that we're reminded of the importance of the archives and their ability to tell stories. I just got back from Montgomery, Alabama, so I got a lengthy tour for a week of different sites of the civil rights and different hidden histories that we may not always be familiar with. I know today is about King, but today is also about the community that King worked with. Today is also about the living archives that we still have here today with us. I've had the wonderful opportunity to meet people who knew King, who were in Montgomery during the Montgomery bus boycott, and a variety of different places that have impacted the movement, but we don't know their names like we know King. In fact, I was actually on a bus across from the Rosa Parks Museum when I learned that Claudette Colvin had passed. And so rest in peace to Claudette Colvin. I want to acknowledge that in this space. Not only is she just a huge and wonderful activist and member of the movement, I think folks will know her name. If you don't, you should really research into her history. Stereotypically, we don't know her name attached to the Montgomery bus boycott because they thought the optics would be bad for a pregnant, unwed teen mother to be the face of a boycott, and they thought it was a chance it would delegitimize the movement. And so we want to make sure we honor her memory today as well, as she passed last week. Now, when I was in Montgomery, I started to think about a line that Jerry told me once, and he said, I believe archivists are engaged in surgery of the collective memory. The operations and interventions they choose determine what we value in the present and future. And so in thinking about the work that I've read in Dr. Ewing's book and the variety of different ways that she chooses to create and tell the stories of our peoples, I wanted to introduce something to us, and I wanted to ask something for people today. Today, I want everybody to let down your veil. If you represent an institution today, I want you to remind yourself that you're human. I want you to take a pause about all of this branding that we got to do and PR and perfect camera shots. Shout out to my BU Productions people. We want to thank them. They make us look good. But I want to remind us to be human. It is through some experiences that I've had in Montgomery, I was reminded, along with some other Black leaders, to really center our humanity and pause this focus on representing something outside of us. Right? If you're a student, I want to challenge you that too. Here at BU, we ask a student who they are, and they say, hey, I'm studying political science. And I'm like, that's not who you are. That's what you do. So I want us to pause for a second and emerge into our humanity. Secondly, I want to think about the story of the Good Samaritan in Luke chapter 10. We often think about that story as helping someone that we find to be helpless, that we agree with. We're not challenged to really see the true humanity in that story and help folks that we may not agree with, but they need our help. So I want us to do that. Lastly, I want us to think about the tremendous impact that these systems of our society have had on people that are at the margins. That includes Black people, that includes other people of color, that includes indigenous people, that includes disabled people, that includes queer people. I want us to be reminded how our systems have been impacting people at the margins. And in so many ways, our systems, some of them which we love, have dehumanized them. And they have to live with those scars as they navigate the world and trying to find their way just like anybody else is. And so at this time, I would like to welcome to the stage Boston University President, Dr. Melissa L. Gilliam. Dr. Gilliam is Boston University's 11th president and is an esteemed and award-winning interdisciplinary researcher in medicine, public health, and the humanities. Please welcome Dr. Gilliam.
It's a cold day today. It's a January cold that goes deep, the kind that makes you think about what's inside and what's outside, and what we carry and what we face. And I thank you all for being here inside with me today. I thank you, Nick, for bringing us together to engage in conversation and to interact with the challenging words from Dr. King's The Three Evils of Society speech. In Chicago, and Nick is perfect, but forgot to mention how much time I too spent in Chicago. But in Chicago, in 1967, King is addressing the National Conference on New Politics, and he looks out to the audience of more than 4,000 gathered, and he says, "We were the dreamers of a dream that dark yesterdays of man's inhumanity to man would soon be transformed into bright tomorrows of justice. Now it's hard to escape the disillusionment and betrayal. Our hopes have been blasted and our dreams have been shattered," close quote. They had fought for civil rights, they'd marched, they'd organized, they'd believed, and now they were protesting the Vietnam War. And yet at that moment, progress felt like it was moving backwards. That day, King spoke in his prophetic voice about the three evils of society: racism, materialism, and militarism. He spoke of a dream deferred, and of the despair and of the disappointment when those supported and elected do not deliver change. Many of us can relate to the feelings that King felt at that time. Yet today we have the advantage of hindsight. We know that King felt that despair when the country was also on the brink of a major transformation. We know that even great leaders are complex, and now we know that the road to justice is long. Today, as we gather, I feel King's challenges, and I know that you do too. At Boston University, we have the privilege of carrying the legacy of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and the legacy of the Reverend Howard Thurman. Dr. Thurman was the first Black dean of Marsh Chapel. Now, you're going to have to forgive me for saying this because this is super simplistic, but King was helping us look outward, look at the systems, look at the power structure, at our laws, at presidents, at policies. He was in conversation with the leaders of our time. And with Thurman, he calls us to look inward. He calls us to meditate and to understand the challenges, but ask more of ourselves. I personally find great strength in these two thinkers. Yes, we can look outward and be dismayed as the country relitigates what we already know to be true and seeks to erase progress that we have made. There are truly societal evils, and they must be addressed. And you'll hear from Dr. Ewing, who has written so beautifully about the evil of racism. Yet, as Thurman would call us to do, I invite us also to ponder, to what extent are these evils in our own hearts and behaviors? Do I personally practice prejudice, ignore poverty, or miss opportunities to practice peace? Now, I am not trying to absolve our elected leaders or appointed leaders of their responsibilities, but I do seek to remind all of us, in the vein of Thurman, that there's still so much each of us can do. As Alexander Solzhenitsyn writes in the Gulag Archipelago, the line separating good and evil passes not through states, nor between classes, nor between political parties either, but right through the heart of every human being. As a physician, I know all too well the realities we are facing. When I was a resident in Chicago, I had a patient, due to her weakened immune system, who had measles. That was the only case of measles in pregnancy I have ever seen in my career. This woman was so sick, she lost her pregnancy. Today, this disease, which was essentially eradicated, is now affecting communities and taking lives. As a global health practitioner, I know the importance of USAID and the impact of its loss on global public health. So I know the realities that we face, but I also know that each of us can do more. For example, Boston University is partnered with Boston Medical Center. If we can remove red tape and bureaucracy, there is even more we can do to strengthen our partnership and our impact, and we can make even more impact on the health of the communities around us. I know there is mistrust in science, in public health, and in higher education. We have come through an incredible pandemic, but we cannot just blame others for that mistrust. We must ask where we may be falling short and how we can make a difference. It's not naive to focus inward. King and Thurman lived and worked at a time of tremendous upheaval in the world, with daily affronts to their dignity. Yes, they challenged others, but they also had the courage to challenge themselves to do more. As King said, life's most persistent and urgent question is, what are you doing for others? King says it is hard to escape the disillusionment and betrayal, and he speaks of the shipwrecked great society. But he did not live to see the generations that have reaped the benefits of the dreams that he gave his life for. And so, while we must be urgent, we must also be patient. The work for a more just society takes time, and it is not just about the pendulum swing of the election cycle. We do not forego our dreams because at times we wake in fear. So I know this because I think of my own grandmother who never lost faith in the future. She experienced so much hardship in her life. Her husband died when she was 42 years old. When he was 42 years old, she went from being the first lady of her church to living on a farm almost as a sharecropper with her 5 surviving children. She had 3 children, one who died of tuberculosis, another of polio, another of influenza. But my grandmother would not look to leaders to determine whether she felt hope or despair. No, each day she fought for a world that she could not see. I lead a life she could not have imagined and did not live to see. I think of the founders of this university. They lived their values despite the world around them. In the wake of the Civil War, they imagined a university that would be open to all people, regardless of race, gender, religion, or creed. Their conviction that was antithetical to the mores of the day, but their conviction paved the way for countless people who otherwise would not have had access to education. And they paved the way for Dr. King, and they paved the way for Dr. Thurman. This university is a place that champions diverse backgrounds, identities, experiences, and perspectives, all essential to learning. We are committed to the freedom of speech and to listening to ideas and viewpoints, even if we disagree with them. And we are committed to service. I believe that this openness and a willingness, even a compulsion to act upon our values, are the main reasons that Boston University continues to be a beacon of light that stays consistently strong, guiding us forward even when underneath a darkening sky. I believe that as members of the Boston University community, we are called in the spirit of these great BU luminaries to challenge ourselves. So let us continue to come together in places like the Howard Thurman Center to learn more about others who are different from us, as Nick said, to help people with whom we don't agree and who need our help, and to hear genuine, real perspectives that are new to us. King also said in his 3 Evil speech that if America does not respond creatively to the challenge to banish racism, some future historian will have to say that a great civilization died because it lacked the soul and the commitment to make justice a reality for all men. From what I have seen, the Boston University community and the people of Greater Boston do not lack in shape or form, nor lack soul, nor do we lack commitment. So let us work even harder to find ways to address the social issues of the day. Next week, I share my vision for Boston University's future with the Boston University community in Greater Boston, and I'll talk about the importance of new and novel partnerships with people across fields of study, background, location, and political perspectives. And let us look to our community and remember this: we are not alone. Despite the challenges of this moment, I find great hope in the work of Boston University because of our faculty, because of our staff, and because of our students. I have had the pleasure of interacting with these people each and every day, and so I know what I am saying. I am so blessed to be a member of this community. On cold, on dark days, on those days when we feel like the evils of society are pressing down upon us, let us keep our resolve. Look to one another, but also look inward and challenge ourselves, as King challenged himself time and time again, as he did on that day in Chicago. And let us remember that Dr. King ultimately never lost his dream for justice, and that he also saw light within the darkness. So thank you. I am so delighted to be joined today by Dr. Eve L. Ewing, my former colleague and someone I admired so much from the University of Chicago. Dr. Ewing will provide the keynote address and will speak about her most recent book, The Original Sins, the miseducation of Black and Native children and the construction of American racism. Thank you so much to Mayor Wu, her beautiful child, and the city of Boston. We are so honored to work closely with you and your team and all of your representatives who are here in the room on issues of peace and prosperity and making our community safer, healthier, more sustainable, more affordable, more inclusive, and more accessible for everyone. And I want to thank Dr. Paula Austin, who is here despite being on sabbatical. I keep telling you, please rest. But thank you so much for being here and for all you do. Thank you.
At this time, I would like to welcome Nayeli Quiles. Nayeli is currently a Boston University senior majoring in political science with a minor in sociology in the College of Arts and Sciences. Nayeli is also a graduate of Boston Latin School. Please welcome Nayeli to the stage.
The following is an excerpt from Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s speech, The Three Evils of Society. Following the quote, I will read the bio of the Honorable Michelle Wu, Mayor of Boston. What they truly advocate is socialism for the rich and capitalism for the poor. I wish that I could say that this is just a passing phase in the cycle of our nation's life. Certainly times of war, times of reaction throughout the society, but I suspect that we are now experiencing the coming to the surface of a triple-pronged sickness that has been lurking within our body politic from its very beginning. This is the sickness of racism, excessive materialism, and militarism. Not only is this our nation's dilemma, it is the plague of Western civilization. As early as 1906, W.E.B. Du Bois prophesied that the problem of the 20th century would be the problem of the color line. Now, as we stand 2/3 into this crucial period of history, we know full well that racism is still that hound of hell which dogs the tracks of our civilization. There has never been a solid, unified, and determined thrust to make justice a reality for Afro-Americans. The step backwards has a new name today. It is called white backlash. But the white backlash is nothing new. It is the surfacing of old prejudices, hostilities, and ambivalences that have always been there. It was caused neither by the cry of Black power nor by unfortunate recent waves of riots in our cities. Boston Mayor Michelle Wu was sworn into office in November 2021 and was re-elected for a second term in November of 2025. She is the daughter of immigrants, a Boston Public Schools mom, and MBTA commuter, and the first woman and first person of color elected to serve in this role. In her first term, Mayor Wu focused on making housing more affordable, schools stronger, and streets safer. Her administration doubled the amount of contracts awarded to businesses owned by women and persons of color, reformed zoning to revitalize downtown and attract more businesses to Boston, and created the most affordable housing in a generation. Through public safety reforms, an expanded youth summer jobs program, and investment across all neighborhoods in year-round opportunities for young people, Boston is now the safest major city in America. Mayor Wu is working across every level of government with businesses and in the community to make Boston the best city to raise a family and the talent capital of the world. She's improving public infrastructure, transportation, housing, health, and education to ensure that Boston continues to lead for generations to come. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much, Nayeli, for the very generous introduction and for your incredible leadership, for representing this university and reminding us the importance of being here today. I look forward to hearing from Rama as well and all of the students that we'll get to see. Thank you to our interpreters today for making this event possible for everyone. And thank you to our hosts here. President Gilliam is a force, and I've been so grateful to partner with you in the university that bears our city's name, to aim every day for that fullest representation of seeing what is possible, empowering our community to go after it, and then highlighting what happens when we collectively stand up to keep going further. So thank you, President Gilliam, for all that you do, for your remarkable leadership, and for the team that you have put together. On that team, thank you, Director Bates, and everyone at the Howard Thurman Center for hosting us, not just this year, but every year. This is one of the most important MLK celebrations that we have in Boston out of many, and it is one that undergirds the partnership between our two institutions at the City of Boston and Boston University. So shout out to all of our seniors who are here. We are very grateful that part of the program is having a wonderful breakfast at BU and then partnering with Age Strong, and shout out to all of our community members and residents from every generation who are here. I got to meet Connor here, who's a student at the Russell. Thank you for being here and representing our BPS students as well. We are very excited to see Dr. Eve Ewing in Boston, and I know we are all eager to hear from her, so thank you to BU for making that possible to create this special opportunity today. There are countless celebrations of Dr. King's life happening right now and all across the country, including right in the city, but there is no place that shaped who he became quite like this one, Boston University. 70 years ago, BU turned Martin into Dr. King. He arrived here in 1951, a young man from the segregated South, stepping into a city that was northern, but hardly enlightened when it came to race and opportunity. Over the next 5 years, this is where he wrestled with ideas of justice and power, responsibility and rule breaking. It was here that he began to study and blend the teachings of Gandhi with the gospel of Jesus. And here where he learned and saw in our community that faith without action is nothing but hot air. BU challenged Dr. King to challenge the nation. And we're very proud that Boston now forever will commemorate that other very special part of what happened in the city, where Martin and Coretta Scott met, fell in love, and began the partnership that would reshape history. Their embrace, their love for community started here in our city and is commemorated deeply by the embrace, not only in its physical form with the monument on the Common, but also with the many works that happen through the community. And I want to recognize and shout out Mr. Richard Taylor and Kathy Taylor, who were just honored yesterday evening by the Embrace for their incredible work in the community. Um, 10 years after Dr. King graduated from BU, he came back to Boston to challenge the nation. He led 20,000 protesters, our community residents here in Boston, from Roxbury to the Common, to demand equal access to quality education, rights, and prosperity. Because even here, in the birthplace of public education, Black children were being shut out of opportunity and denied the resources their white peers took for granted. And Dr. King wasn't alone in that fight. Boston legends, institutions like Ruth Batson, Paul Parks, Mel King, launched the Black education movement, organized our communities, ran for office, fought to give every child the opportunity they deserved. They understood what Dr. King understood, that education is the foundation of freedom. And that's why we are so excited that Dr. Ewing is here with us this afternoon, a scholar who has studied the pervasiveness of inequality in American schools, an organizer who's carrying on the legacy of those leaders, and an activist who is fighting every day to make our education system serve every student, like so many of us in Boston are pushing for. For our part, Boston recognizes that we have work to do, and we're investing in expanding opportunity across all of our neighborhoods. We're reimagining our curriculum to challenge every student and investing in the spaces our young people deserve, from White Stadium to Madison Park to schools all across our neighborhoods, where we're moving forward on a long overdue set of renovations and investments. We're creating more opportunities for neighborhood small businesses, entrepreneurs who reflect our community, chances to make right with the promissory note of this democracy that was born right here in our city. I'm grateful every day to work alongside some of the most dedicated individuals on the planet, to call my colleagues at the City of Boston, my friends and fellow public servants. Some of them are here today, many of them are out clearing the snow and making sure that our city can keep running. But I want to give a big, big shout out to our Age Strong Commissioner, Commissioner Emily Shea, to our Chief of Housing, Chief Sheila Dillon, to my colleagues on the City Council who are here, City Council President Liz Braden, City Councilor Sharon Durkin, and everyone who serves with the city. The work that we do every day, the drive that we have to keep going and keep moving forward despite whatever comes our way, is born from this spirit of Boston that I like to think Dr. King absorbed some and then infused a whole lot more with his time here. None of it works without Dr. King's lesson, and the one that the Howard Thurman Center teaches your students every day, that intelligence plus character is a true goal of education. That is a lofty set of ideals for all of us to hold up to, so most of all my charge is this. Today is an incredibly important day, but let it be just one day that we are moving forward. Every other day of the year, let us hold strong to these values, to the lessons of Dr. King, and to the motivation and the urgency that we know we can still make a better world possible. Thank you for coming today. Thank you for having us.
At this time, I would like to welcome Ramatullah Ba Bangra, is currently a Boston University student majoring in health sciences in the Sargent College of Health and Rehabilitation Sciences. She is also a graduate of the John D. O'Brien School. Please welcome her to the stage.
The following is an excerpt from Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s speech, The Three Evils of Society. Following the quote, I will read Dr. Ewing's and Dr. Austin's bios. The second aspect of our afflicted society is extreme materialism. No one can outlook the wonders of science has wrought for our lives. But when scientific power outruns moral power, we end up with guided missiles and misguided men. It is this moral lag in our thing-orientated society that blinds us to the human reality around us and encourages us in the greed and exploitation which creates a sector of poverty in the midst of wealth. We have deluded ourselves into believing the myth that capitalism grew and prospered out of the Protestant ethic of hard work and sacrifice. The fact is that capitalism was built on the exploitation and suffering of Black slaves and continues to thrive on the exploitation of the poor, both here and abroad. The problems of racial injustice and economic injustice cannot be solved without a radical redistribution of political and economic power. We must devote at least as much to our children's education and the health of the poor as we do to the care of our automobiles and beautiful, impressive hotels. Dr. Paula C. Alston is an associate professor of history and inaugural associate director of African American and Black Diaspora Studies program. She is the author of The Coming of Age in Jim Crow, D.C., Navigating the Politics of Everyday Life, and published with New York University Press in 2019, and is currently working on her second book, You May Be Next, A History of Police Violence in Washington, D.C., and the activism against it from 1920 to 1970. Courses she teaches include Black women's history in the U.S., U.S. civil rights and social movement history, race, ethnicity, and childhood history in the U.S., and critical university studies, the history of BU. Dr. Eve L. Ewing is a writer, scholar, and cultural organizer from Chicago, an associate professor in the Department of Race, Diaspora, and Indigeneity at the University of Chicago. She is the award-winning author of 5 books. Her most recent book is The Original Sins, The Miseducation of Black and Native Children and the Construction of American Racism, an instant New York Times and USA Today bestseller. Ewing's first book about education, the widely acclaimed Ghost in the Schoolyard, Racism and School Closings on the Chicago South Side, focuses on the historically Black neighborhood of Bronzeville, where she taught middle school for 3 years. Electric Archies, Ewing's debut collection of poetry, essays, and universal art, was marked by Publishers Weekly as stunning and praised by NPR for a precision that is both beautiful and deeply uncomfortable. Ewing has also written several projects for Marvel Comics, most notably the Iron Heart and the Black Panther series. And she is continuing telling mutant stories at the helm of Exceptional X-Men. Ewing has been an educator for many years in K-12, university, and community-based settings, including Chicago Public Schools, After School Matters, Harvard University, and Wesley College. Currently at the University of Chicago, she teaches courses on race, education, Afrofuturism, and directs the Beyond Schools Lab and the colloquium on race, education, and social transformation. She is also an occasional instructor of the Prison and Neighborhood Project, a universal arts and humanity project that connects through teaching, classes, workshops, and guest lectures. Ewing serves on boards or in an advisory capacity for the Words of Wonder Literacy Festival, A Long Walk Home, Market Box, Ecosystems for Care, and PEN America Writing for Justice Fellowship. Her poems and essays have been published in many venues, including The New Yorker, The New York Times, The Atlantic, The Nation, Vanity Fair, The Washington Post, The New Republic, and Poetry of Magazine. Thank you.
Hello. Hello. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for such powerful words.
Thank you.
We need them. We have a little bit of time, and I'm very, thank you so much for engaging with us and having this conversation with me. And I'm gonna try to channel, I think, things that people want to talk with you about, sure. And maybe things people don't want to talk to you about. I don't know. I mean, I came up with the question, so. So much of what you said resonates for the current moment: fortitude, courage, fear, and I really appreciate it. I've been working on my own research that is looking at some archival materials from the 1940s and 1950s, specifically looking at police violence in DC. And one of the first things I wanted to talk to you about was moral suasion as a strategy. Now, this is something we know, and when we think about moral suasion, we think very much about King. We think about the philosophies of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, really kind of doubling down on the importance of using moral suasion as a strategy. And I wanted to ask you sort of what you think about that, sure. Given in the time that we live in. I mean, a lot of the material that I look at, and this is the 1940s, right? So it's sort of pre-SCLC talking about the importance of morality, using morality as a organizing strategy. But I'm seeing language from Black newspapers in particular talking about racial segregation, racial discrimination, racial violence. Lynchings are prominent still in the 1940s, in case people did not know that. But they are talking about moral erosion, moral decay, moral dry rot, which was one of my favorites. And this distance between the aims of American democracy and morality and what we actually do. And I wanted to ask you, in thinking about your words just now, in thinking about your work, your organizing work, can you talk a little bit with us about what you think about moral suasion as a strategy right now?
Sure. I'm going to break protocol just slightly, Dr. Austin, because they told me I had 10 minutes. I was trying to max out my 600 seconds, so I want to say some very quick thank yous.
Absolutely.
Thank you to Nick. Thank you to President Gilliam. Thank you to Mayor Wu. Thank you to Nayeli. Thank you to Ramatulai. Thank you to all of the hands that prepared this space before we came in so that we could have such a beautiful place to gather and convene together. Thank you. Here's the thing. I think that we find ourselves, so for much of my lifetime, and I think certainly in Dr. King's lifetime, there was a belief that there were some fundamental precepts upon which you could find shared ground with people who in other aspects of their lives seem to be rooted in this term that we call prejudice. When we say prejudice, prejudice is an interpersonal phenomenon, right? So prejudice is something that an individual bears towards another individual, and it therefore can sometimes be overcome with appeal to the shared space that you have with that individual. And I think in Dr. King's time, certainly the appeal of Christianity, right, of the idea that he could meet with other theologians, with other pastors, folks of the clergy on that shared ground, was presumed to be kind of a sacred space, literally, from which you could begin a conversation. And I think within my lifetime, there was an assumption that the shared institutions of democracy and the pillars of what was believed to be the American Republic, as many, caveats and terms and conditions that have always applied for many of us, as may be the case, that you could appeal to that shared sense of the courts, or the law, or Congress, or the peaceful transfer of power, or those kinds of things, as having that same kind of sacred grounds upon which to make an appeal. And what we have seen, which those who are students of global history, those who are the experts who study authoritarianism globally in the past and the present, right? What those folks tell us is that the first move by authoritarians is to constantly kick the tires and test the boundaries of exactly how sacred those things are. So a court tells you don't do something, you do it anyway. See what happens. right? You take a power held by Congress and seize it for yourself and see what happens. And the more you take those actions and the more you see that in fact those allegedly sacred pillars of American democracy were maybe not so worthy of protection as some people thought they were, then the further you go. And I think we are in a moment where I believe that appealing to the moral strength and the shared ideology of good people with good hearts is always a good strategy. And I think it is always perilous to assume that you have nothing in common with somebody, right? I come from the city of Fred Hampton, okay? And Fred Hampton was somebody that in his very short life, which was cut short by the Chicago Police Department, who then lied about it, in his very short life, he was very explicit about his willingness to build coalitions with poor white people in Chicago, with Native people, with Puerto Rican folks, right? With anybody who was willing to say, hey, this thing is choking us, to call upon Audre Lorde's metaphor again, right? It's choking all of us. She said it's grinding all of us into dust. I come from the city of Harold, Washington, right? Of somebody who looked around and said, hey, if you are being hurt by this system, or if you are just a person of good conscience, let's go. And so I'm always going to be a person who advocates a clear-eyed view of finding shared ground of other people. To name one other person, you and I are students of critical race theory, and Derek Bell, the great critical race theorist, great legal scholar, taught us about the idea of interest convergence, right? That great moral transformation happens when people are able to find a convergence in their shared material interest. So for all those reasons, I'm never a person who's going to say, I don't want you to come to the meeting because I don't like the way you look or the thing you tweeted that one time or whatever, right? I might not like you, but if we have a thing in common, let's go. It's perilous to do otherwise. It is in this moment equally perilous, if not more so, to overestimate the weight of moral dialogue, right? What I see, and I'm not a political scientist, I'm just a girl trying to make it, but what I see is a plurality, a majority of people of good conscience rising up. And not only in the matter of, ICE snatching our neighbors off the streets, but, prior to that, things like abortion rights in this country, right? This is something that a majority of voters support, right? From across the aisle. We are, in my view, past a moment where it behooves us to think about who is the neighbor that you need to sit down and have a beer summit with and try to change their mind about something. We are in a moment of an ongoing ascent of structural authoritarianism. It does not matter if, what my neighbor thinks about me, or if we sit down together in church, if a person is being paid a premium by the government to become an armed militiaman who can come snatch people up off the street. That's not a prejudice problem. It's not a prejudice problem. Nor, when the person comes to snatch my neighbor, will I be trying to appeal to their good nature in that moment. I shall not, right? And so I think in this moment, it is crucial for us, and I don't like overly dichotomous or us versus them terms, but I think it is important for us to think about how we convince our neighbors, not that we agree, but that we are all powerful together. And that we think really critically about what the collective power that we have that can equal or ultimately surmount the vicious violence of the state power that we see descending upon us. What we always have is numbers. There's more of us. But what do we do with that?
Yeah. No, I really appreciate that, because I think and I blame historians for this. So I'm taking responsibility for this. That we didn't actually learn about the civil rights movement in the right way. And I face this every day in the classrooms with students who come in.
Yeah, we won.
And sort of
Good.
We won.
Yeah.
It was successful.
Right.
And the sort of messiness of the movement has not come through in our education. And it is one of the things that I try to focus on in my classroom, is to make that messiness very apparent, because I think it helps us in our contemporary moment to see things that we might think about as messy, and to actually be able to understand how to look at those things that are messy.
Sure.
So I appreciate that kind of the way that you've really boiled that down to talk about how is this time different
Yes.
than the last time.
May I share something briefly in
Yeah.
response to that?
Yeah.
There's a quotation that I return to a lot, which I believe first came to me from the abolitionist writer Mariam Kaba, but it probably is something that others have said as well. And that's the idea that conflict is a resource. What I mean by that is that when you disagree with somebody, that is an opportunity to clarify your own understanding of your own position. And it is an opportunity to learn and grow in your commitment towards struggle, right? And so, I have, in the last several years, had amazing conversations with colleagues and comrades and friends when, they post something on social media that I don't agree with, or I hear them say something. And instead of being like, "Dear diary, now I got beef with so-and-so because they said this thing and I don't like it," right? That because
You might have also done that.
I mean, if I don't know them, sure, but like, I have beef with other people about more, the UPS man that always throws my boxes behind the dumpster. That's my primary enemy in life. Other than that, so what I do then is I ask them, like, hey, can I, and I don't come at them and say, like, here's why you're wrong. I ask, would you be open to having a conversation about that? I would love to learn more about, where you're coming from. And I don't mean this of like random racist people that I like meet on the tea or whatever, right? But I mean people with whom I have developed a shared sense of trust, so that I understand that because we want the same things, that moment of conflict is not the summation of our relationship. So that means that there's a prior step that's really important, and this to me is like the bedrock of Black feminist practice, which is relationship building. So in my life, I spend a lot more time like baking stuff for my neighbors, or like checking on people, or saying like, hey, I'm running to the store, can I get you something? So that I have a foundation of basic trust, so that when they say something that I don't agree with, I can say, hey, would you be open to having that conversation? And what comes from that conversation is either that, like, actually it turns out we agree on a lot of things, or sometimes a honing of my own understanding, right? Which is good for me. And so I think, to your point, oftentimes the way that, and you could blame historians, the media, the patriarchy, blame whoever you want, but we do have a very sanitized, and this is also just how history works, right? You have a 30-minute argument with somebody, and the next day you say, I just had the worst argument with so-and-so yesterday. I say, what happened? You give me your distilled one-line version of it, right? That's how narrative works, and that's fine. But as a result, there's this danger of this idea of the civil rights movement, or of any struggle, of anti-apartheid South Africa, of Standing Rock, of any struggle, the peril of thinking that everybody was like, well, since we all agree, let's end the meeting early and like go to sleep and wake up and fight our enemies tomorrow. And that's not how any human gathering has ever worked, ever, right? Try planning a birthday party or a wedding or something. Like, that's not how people work.
That's not how it happens.
And when we lean into understanding those points of division, we often find that they have a profound resonance and relevance for our own times, right? And so, but it also requires us to be unafraid of seeing our heroes as human people, and not as like, an easy kind of someone who knew everything all the time. So, one of my favorite interviews that kind of has gone viral a couple times recently, and folks can look it up, but there's a video of Nikki Giovanni and James Baldwin getting in an argument. And it's great. She's like, you're wrong, James Baldwin, right? And like, that is somehow not allowed or not permitted, but she's speaking to him from a different generational perspective, a different gender and sexuality perspective. And so those moments allow us to hone our own understanding and our own understanding of the world. And I think that that's just really important.
Thank you so much for that. I mean, I think that what you've just distilled about those important conversations, and our individual willingness to be wrong, to do some introspection, to have those hard conversations, is really at the core of social movement and movement building. And I think that's not what we're learning in the classroom. I mean, in my classroom, you are learning that. But in most classrooms, maybe you are not. And I think that seems so important, because that is the work That is how King is able to get the numbers showing up places, is because there are a bunch of people having those conversations with their neighbors.
Yes.
That's grassroots organizing,
Yes.
whereas what King was doing was really mobilizing, right? Like all those folks at the grassroots level got people out. So I think that's one of those things, those sort of lessons in the archives.
And it's
for
also
me.
essential because, not to sound like, even like the FBI is sending people in
Yes.
King's time, right? Like,
Yes.
the federal government is actively seeking to undermine social movements by sowing the seeds of discord.
Yes, the counterintelligence
That's not
programs.
crazy. That's
That's
like
not-
it's like
it's real.
declassified
It's
federal,
real.
right? And so we know that, and so therefore, if your movement is always based on this kind of facile presumption that you have to always agree, you're incredibly vulnerable
Yeah.
to any kind of minor disagreement
Yeah.
or insurgent
Yeah.
conflict.
Yeah. And fun fact, it's not fun. Those COINTELPRO files of the FBI are found because some anti-war activists broke into an FBI office really to burn draft cards. And what they found instead were the files of the FBI that the FBI had been keeping on activists really across
Shout
a
out
bunch
to them
of
for
different,
being like,
I
we
know,
should
a bunch of different movements. Anyway,
this, yeah.
Anyway, let me. Okay, can I move? I'm going to move past archives, even though
Sure.
really archives are inside of this question already. And thank you so much for shouting out to the. You could see some King archives, which is what you've been watching behind us. You can see some of those King archives in the reading room in the Mugar Library. So yes, down at the bottom of the stairs, you can go on a archives tour. I wanted to talk a little bit about. You talked about grief.
Yes.
And you talk about grief and mourning in Original Sins, which, by the way, if you all haven't read, so these are only 3 of the books. And I just want to say, they come from the Boston Public Library.
Yay.
So,
Which branch?
well, I got them called from the Central Branch to my Adams Street branch.
Okay.
So,
I'll allow it. Yeah.
thanks.
Yeah.
So anyway, so I will return them soon, so if anybody's looking for them, they will be back. So one of the things that you talked about in Original Sins was mourning, and you talked briefly today about grief, and I wanted to ask you to talk a little bit more about it. We are suffering so many losses right now. I mean, it was hard for me to not be sobbing while you were talking. So many losses, actual losses,
Yes.
of people. But also some abstract ideological, maybe even some myths, things we thought we had that
Sure.
we actually did not have, but
Sure.
now we feel like we have lost them. But one of the things you say in Original Sins that I loved so much was that mourning is a way of refuting the erasure, right? You're talking about the mourning of a school, of a school building, but not just a school building. Or maybe, no, this is maybe from Ghosts in the Schoolyard, I think. Sorry, I'm mixing
That's
up.
okay.
I'm mixing up your stuff. It's all you.
Yeah.
I'm just mixing it up.
I kind of write about the same 4 things over and over. Yeah.
That's okay, we all do. Mine is like violence. Anyway, so yeah, refuting the erasure of the thing that is lost.
Yes.
And I think in our current case of the thing that is being wrenched from our cold, trying not to be dying hands. And I wanted to talk to you, ask you to talk a little bit about what grief and mourning, but I think as kind of potentially motivating things, are right now for us, right? And I think you get at this when you're talking about fortitude a little bit. So I just wanted to ask you to talk a little bit about that.
Yes. Are you asking what do we do with grief?
Yes, sure.
Well, one thing is.
I mean, okay, I'll
Yeah,
add, because it can be, and I think maybe for a lot of us who have experienced grief and maybe are currently experiencing
It's debilitating.
grief, that can be it, right?
Yeah.
It's just debilitating. I'm
Sure.
incapacitated. I'm just going to order Chinese food for the next 6 meals.
Sure.
And just do that.
Yeah, I think that, there's a phrase that many people associate with ACT UP, and I'm sure, has been important in many different social movements, which is, mourn the dead, fight like hell for the living.
Yeah.
And I think that, like many other important core human experiences, society in the United States, we often don't give adequate space, ritual, acknowledgement, understanding of grief, of loss. Western society, capitalist society, right? However you want to square it, that we are not the mainstream culture does not encourage us to name that we are grieving. And if you think about it, cultures and societies all over the world, many of which are practiced and inhabited by many people in these rooms, right, that historically over human history, humans have come up with ways of marking, I am in a different state, right? I'm going to wear a different thing, or I'm going to sleep in a different place, or I'm going to walk or sit or move a different way. I am a grieving person. This is a different class of person that I'm currently occupying, right? And, you know, in a capitalist society, you're encouraged to move on as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
And so I think that, and there's sort of a binary that gets posed, which is like either you make no space for your grief and you move on and you fight, or you like give into it completely, right, and you curl into a ball. And I feel like there has to be something ritualistic, or for me at least, ritual is one way to find a middle space between those two. And so to name, I am grieving, I am sad, there is an absence within me that will be forever unfilled, right? And the way that absence affects me will be unpredictable, it will be nonlinear, but I live here, right? This is where I live right now. I'm living in this space of grief and loss. And to name that and to be forthright about it. While I was preparing this keynote, I was, driving to like the grocery store or something and just listening to the radio, and I found myself just overcome with deep sadness. And I think I was sad about, when you are spending time in archives, you're kind of like in somebody's head. So I think I was really sad about Dr. King and and his life, right? Which, the things he endured, the things people around him endured, what it means to be murdered at that age. I was sad about the many losses in my community and across our country. I was sad about a close friend of mine, Amy Chung, who was also a community organizer, a quintessential Bostonian, who passed away in 2024 from cancer, that I'm still grieving, and I was talking to her a lot as I was writing this piece, And so it was important for me to sit with that and to say, like, this is a thing that is happening to me. This is a space that I'm passing through. It is important that I acknowledge it and I decide what I'm going to do with it, right? But I do have to get out on the other side, and I can dwell here for as long as I need, but I can't stay here forever, right? Nor can I pretend that I'm not here. So I feel like that is really important, and I really encourage folks, in whatever you may be grieving, whatever those rituals of mourning look like for you, to be candid about them, and to think about how you make space in your living space. Do you light a candle? Do you say a moment of prayer? Do you read a letter from a person and get back into conversation with them? Do you talk to them? What does that look like? And then when will you be ready to exit that space, and to be very deliberative about that?
And the community piece of that, those
For sure.
community mourning rituals
For
together,
sure.
which I think we didn't get enough opportunity to have that during COVID, despite the fact that we were losing people and had lost so much else.
Absolutely.
I've got 2 more minutes with you, and so I want to go back to the archives briefly. I wanted to ask you to kind of leave us with some thoughts. Leave us with some thoughts. You've given us so much. Leave us with some more thoughts.
Okay,
I'm just
cool,
going to
cool.
keep extracting from you. Okay. I wanted you to talk a little bit about this, you talked about kind of being in the archives and listening to the voices and the lessons that are in there. And of course, the archive, I have sort of love-hate relationship with them, with the archives. But I loved this idea of a kind of dialectical, interactive, kind of dialogic relationship with the archives, and also that everything we are making archives at this particular
in this moment. Yes.
So I wanted you to sort of leave us with some archives.
Pitch you on archives. Sure. Well, I actually really appreciate that. Your check is in the mail, because there was a whole section of on archives and the nature of them that I cut out, and for the sake of time. But I'm an Afrofuturist writer, which that's a different, invite me back and I'll give a different keynote about what that means.
We will.
But, okay, great. But part of what that means is that I think a lot about the nonlinearity of time and the way that we have to communicate. So I said this in like one sentence in the comments that I shared today, but if you sent me a text message this morning and said, hey, by the way, I know it's going to be snowy, you should enter through this door, right? And I didn't see it because I was showering or pontificating or looking out the window. And then I got here 2 hours later, I looked at my phone and somebody said, how do you know this is the door? I would say, oh, Dr. Austin told me, right? I would say, you told me. We weren't in the same space, and it wasn't a synchronous communication, but you issued a text into the world, and you communicated with me that way, across time and across space. And that's how I think about archives, quite literally. I think that this is why I write books. It's kind of amazing, that when people read these books in other parts of the city or the country or the world, they are hearing my voice in their head without me being there. That's wild. And so I really, and especially the beauty of, and I promise they're not paying me to like pitch you on going to see the archives here, but the incredible thing when you get to visit physical archives, many of which are available in public libraries and publicly available spaces, is that you might be holding the piece of paper, right? That person held. And so they are, why did they do it if not for you to find it? And so I really believe in archival work as a form of ancestral communication. And I use that term of kind of shared political ancestor, right? These folks worked really hard and died very young, not for us to forget. Not for us to forget. And so I think of that as being really important. And I'll say very briefly as the light blinks red, that what you said about we are also making archives and our families also have archives, right? If you have a photo that, a school picture that somebody sent to your grandmother and it has her handwriting on the back and says, this is so-and-so's baby, and this picture, this is their Easter picture from this year, that is a gift to you. That person has left you this gift across time and space. Even if they are not with you, they are with you. And so as you return to the prior question about grief, that is a lot of my grief practice, is the belief that the things that have been left for me were not left for me by accident, right? And that these folks are presenting themselves to me so that we might have a conversation. And it's my responsibility to sit down and chat with them when I have an opportunity.
Yeah, and I think that also means that the things that we are doing and making are also will have a responsibility into the future.
Yes, print your photos. Don't let Mark Zuckerberg own your photos. Print them out. He don't love you. Print them out, and you write where you were and who's in the picture and what's the date. How many times have you found a photo from an ancestor and you're like, I have no idea who this is, and everyone who could tell me is gone. Right? Don't assume that somebody's going to remember that this was a graduation or a birthday or what year it was or who it was. Write it down. And that is also our responsibility.
No, we did not pay you to shout out to go to see the archives, but the physicality of archives is so incredibly important. Interacting with them physically, I think you don't know what the size is, you don't know what the writing looks like in a lot of cases if it's just digital. So I appreciate that, and I appreciate you all for going on the archives tour. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for
joining us today.
Thank you so much.
And thank you, everyone.
All right, I'm back. I know y'all missed me and all that good stuff. I want to get some thank yous out the way. It's really important to thank the folks that help bring this into a reality. I'll be honest, I drive people a little crazy. I text people with an idea, and I start there, and then I have big dreams. And then we get all of these camera setups. I tell them that, hey, orientation is before us, and then there's CGS matriculation the day before, which cuts into our setup time, and blah, 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 blah. And Nancy Mars and teams and Deshaun Hendrickson always say, like, yep, we'll make it work. And so let's thank you to our BU Productions crew, and let's. I want to thank Bruce Gonzalez, who's the leader over there in catering. Our Age Strong Commission, where you at? So our Age Strong folks, right? Some of them told me that they are fine with seniors, and some said we're fine with elderly. Whichever one y'all prefer. They had a lively breakfast this morning. That was beautiful and filled with an amazing band, the Lee Wilson Band, and so we want to thank those folks. I want to thank you to Government and Community Affairs. They make all of this easy in liaison with the City of Boston to get this done. I want to thank our partners, which is African American and Black Diaspora Studies, and also, I said Government and Community Affairs. I want to thank BU Libraries as well. You all will be able to get some wonderful tours of the Martin Luther King Reading Room starting at 2 p.m. Tours are about 20-minute intervals, and so you'll meet those folks down the stairs, down these stairs over here to start those tours. So I want to thank those folks as well. Lastly, I want to say my favorite thank you to my friend, Dr. Paula Austin, for. She's here on sabbatical, y'all, and so she's not really supposed to be here. I text Dr. Margarita Guillory, who's the chair for the African American the director of the African American and Black Diaspora Studies program, and I said, hey, do you approve of Paula doing this program for me? And she said, Nick, that would be excellent, and I think Paula would do it. And then I text Paula, I say, will you do this? She says, yes. Okay, so thank her. Speaking of archives, she and I are working on another amazing project. We had a group of students who will go to Montgomery for a BU Hub co-curricular course called American Civil Rights and Sites. And so I just got back from Montgomery, and I tell you, I was with a collective of 35 Black leaders, and I feel deeply changed and impacted to share a message from Mayor Reed, who said, bring everybody and your family to Montgomery to see what Bryan Stevenson has done in Montgomery. So I want to make sure I share that with y'all. At your leisure, make sure you go there and stay in the Good Elevation Hotel. Those folks are wonderful. It's beautiful music being played, and it's wonderful to hear people who will speak to you about Montgomery, speak to you about their experiences, and tell you what Bryan Stevenson has done and how it's regenerated the economy in Montgomery. And so make sure you get there. The last thing I want to say is to our funders. This program is not possible without the wonderful gifts from Richard and Kathy Taylor and Sharon Ryan. We are not able to do this without them. We're not able to provide the breakfast and not do the setup. And then I want to thank you all for coming here to hear what Dr. Ewing and others have had to say and share with us. And I'm going to also say this for our in-the-room audience, right? There's a point I'm going to close this show really shortly, but I want you to remain seated. Our live stream audience and our Boston TV audience, I want to thank you all for joining our program. And then, we'll have some fun stuff for the in-room audience that we're going to have after our close. And so, earlier I wanted to get the show started, and I rushed through some things that I wanted to share with you all. I'd be remiss to be the director of the Howard Thurman Center for Common Ground if I actually don't share something from Howard Thurman. That's one. And then two, there's a piece of this speech from King that I really want to share. And I tell you all, I'm really meticulous about this. I really enjoy King and Thurman a lot, and I'm deeply searching for new things that I haven't heard yet, or I'm sure other people aren't familiar with. And so I'm gonna be honest, I nerd out about this a lot. I'm in archives, I'm listening to audio months on a time. You'll walk into my office and you'll just hear King's voice or you'll hear Thurman's voice, because I'm trying to figure out what we share with this audience and how we share the wonderful words that they've had to share with us. When Martin Luther King passed on April 7th, 1968, in a radio interview, Howard Thurman was asked about the significance of Martin Luther King, and he said this: I think that his most important significant contribution to our time is in this, that he moved on to the social scene out of the intensity and depth of this personal religious experience. And this, from my point of view, was not only psychologically tremendous, but in terms of the history of organized religion in America, it was profoundly prophetic, and the significance of its prophetic dimension is tomorrow. For you see, if he had moved into civil rights struggle because discrimination, segregation, brutality, all these terrifying things were undemocratic, because they were un-American, because they were uncivilized, that would have been one thing. But he moved into them with the conviction that these things were mortal sins and this is new. So he put at the center of a conventional religious experience an ethical imperative, and by doing so, he gave organized religion no hiding place. For it was in the name of that he spoke, and it was this that they were preaching, so that they could not say what he is doing is outside of the religious frame of reference. It was deep in the center of it. I want to close with this quote from King's speech, The Three Evils of Society. Again, after I read this quote, the show will conclude for our live streaming television audience, and I would ask that our in-person audience remain seated. So King stated, "So let us stand in this convention knowing that on some positions, cowardice asks the question, is it safe? Expediency asks the question, is it politic? Vanity asks the question, is it popular? But conscience asks the question, is it right? And on some positions, is it necessary for the moral individual to take a stand that is neither safe, nor politic, nor popular, but he must do so because it is right?" Thank you all for coming again in person. Please stay seated.